Hi there, my name's Kelsey, and today we're going to be making a simple Meteor Dodge game using Scratch. This is a beginner level project for those who are new to using Scratch because the only required knowledge is that you know how to make backdrops and sprites, as well as the basic use of motion blocks and if statements. So to start, let's create our sprites. We'll start by searching for a sprite, and in the search bar, you're going to type rocket ship. So you'll see this sprite here is the one that we're going to want to choose. We have 5 different costumes here, although I don't need the last one, so I'm just going to get rid of it. So now that we have our rocket ship, we can get on to make our explosion animation. Basically what this game is it's going to have a rocket ship that follows your mouse and meteors that rain down from the top of the game screen. If the rocket ship hits a meteor, the game is over and it will play an explosion animation. That's what we're going to make for our next sprite. So to start, I'm going to be uploading some images. These are all images that I found by going online in a browser and searching up pixelated explosion. You can save them to your computer and upload them straight to Scratch from there. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to upload some other costumes. So we'll see once this is done, I have 6 sprites. Number 4 has something else as a part of it, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So now we have 5. All right, so now it's time to make our meteor sprites. We're going to start by painting a sprite. I'm going to start by choosing a color. In this case, I'm going to choose yellow. And then this is going to be the center of the meteor. We want it to look like a flame, so I'm going to change the size of this to 20 so that it's a little bit smaller and draw a flame-like shape right here in the middle. This doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to look somewhat flame-like. And we're going to be scaling them down a lot later. And you'll see I've filled mine in with the fill tool. So now I'm just going to increase the size to 30. And then I'm going to draw the fireball. I'm just going to make this teardrop-like shape at the bottom. And then make the tail of the meteor. As mentioned, I know this isn't perfect, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to look somewhat like a fireball. So you'll see when we size this down, let's try about 30. You'll see it will look a little bit more like a flame. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this so that we have a total of 4 costumes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with my eraser to make each one of them different. I'll catch the video up once I'm done with this so that you don't need to watch because the process is going to be the same for all of these. All right, so here we have our 4 sprite costumes. You'll see they're not perfect, but if you alternate through them all very quickly, it might look like the meteor is moving. So the next thing we're going to do is go in and scale our rocket ship and explosion. I'm going to start by scaling the rocket ship down to about 40. We'll see if we move this explosion that it's now quite a bit smaller. The next thing we're going to do is scale the explosion. It needs to be about the size of the rocket ship. So I'm going to try sizing it to 30 and see if it covers. It doesn't cover all the way, so I'm going to try about 50. And there we go. We'll see it covers perfectly. And all of these other shapes are approximately the same size. So what I'm going to do is at the moment, I'm going to hide this. That way we only have our rocket ship and our meteor sprite. So now that we're done with all of our sprites, it's time to move on to the backdrops. The first backdrop, we're going to start by just filling in black. And then we're going to add some white dots to look like stars. I'm going to take this rectangle tool and create a large rectangle to cover the backdrop. Then I'm going to grab the paint tool and change the size down to about 5. Next, I'm going to change the color to white and add a whole bunch of stars. These are just random dots that will be placed all over the canvas, and you'll see they'll start to look a little bit like stars. You can add some variation in size as well. I'm going to be doing that, so I'm going to change the pen size to 10. Then we'll add some dots like this, just to make it look a little bit more random. So you'll see with that, now we have our night sky backdrop. All right, so the next one we're going to need to do is make our game over backdrop. I'm going to do that by duplicating the night sky and adding some text. This is just going to say game over. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this big enough so that it can be clearly read, and then place it right in the middle of the canvas. And that's our screen for when the game is over. So now that we're done with our backdrops, we can get on to coding the rocket ship. I'm going to start by going to this code section and dragging out 2 when green flag clicked blocks. Under the first one, we're going to start by setting the location. I'm going to set the rocket ship's location to 0, 0. Next, we're going to want to show the rocket ship, because if the game has just ended, it will be hidden. So when we start a new game, we're going to want to show it again. Next thing we're going to do is grab a forever loop. In this forever loop, we're going to want the rocket ship to always follow the mouse pointer. So we're going to grab this point towards mouse pointer block, and then we're going to grab this move 10 steps. I'm going to change 10 to 5 though. And now you'll see if we run this, it will always follow the mouse pointer. So now that that's done, we can move on to our other when green flag clicked. Under this one, we're going to want to create a variable called time. This will act as our timer. So we're going to start by setting it to 0, and then we're going to add the loop that will make it count up. So under here, we're going to wait. In this case, I'm going to count up by 0.1. You could count up by less or more depending on how fast you want your timer to count. Then I'm going to change time by, and then 0.1. And what this will do is it will make the timer count up, almost like a stopwatch. Finally, what we're going to do is we're going to choose next costume. This will make sure that the rocket ship is always changing costumes and appears to be animated. Let's test this out. We'll press the green flag and you'll see it looks like it's always moving. So now that that's done, we can move on to the when I receive game over. We're going to need to create a new message called game over. So to do this, we're going to grab the when I receive block and create our message. This is going to be the message that's played whenever the rocket ship hits a meteor. And when we receive that message, what we want to do is hide the sprite, and then under control, you see this stop all block, but we don't want to stop all the actions. We want to stop all the scripts in sprite. What this will do is it will stop all of these code blocks, but leave whatever code is running in these 2 sprites active. So that's all the code for the rocket ship, and now it's time to move on to coding the meteor. The first thing we're going to do for this is grab a when green flag clicked block. Under this, what we want to do is create multiple versions of the meteor. So we're going to grab a repeat block, and I'm going to repeat this about 4 times. You can adjust the difficulty of the game by making this number bigger, or make it easier by making it smaller. What we're going to do under that is create a clone of myself. This will create multiple versions of the meteor, instead of having to code for them each individually. Finally, we're going to grab a hide block. This will hide the meteors until they're in place. So the next thing we're going to need to do is define what happens to these clones. So we're going to grab a when I start as clone block. Under here, we're going to grab a forever loop. What we're going to want to do is we're going to hide them, and then we want to wait a specific amount of time. But we want this time to vary so that they all don't come down all at once. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab a pick random, and we're going to do 1 to 5 seconds. Next, we're going to go to motion and choose the point in direction block. We're also going to need a set x2 and set y2 block. We're going to ignore these first 2 blocks for now because we're going to need operators for those, but we can set y to 180. Next, we're going to go to our operators. And for the point and direction, we're going to grab two different operators. We're going to grab a subtraction and a pick random. So for the first pick random, we're going to pick between -20 and 20. And for the subtraction, we're going to choose 180. This will pick a random direction for the meteor to aim. Next, for x, we're going to choose another pick random. And in this case, it's going to be choosing from -240 to 240. This will choose where in the screen the meteor will come from. And finally, we're setting y to 180, which would be the top of the screen. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to show the sprite so that it will show up in the game screen. Finally, we need to decide how many times the next part of the code will repeat. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a repeat until, then we're going to go to operators and pick a less than operator. In this case, we're going to go to motion and we want to check if y position is less than, and in this case, we want to do -160. This will mean this loop will repeat until the meteor gets down to around the bottom of the screen. Under this section, we're going to go to looks and choose next costume. This will make the animation work so that it looks like the meteor is burning. And then we're going to go to motion and choose move 10 steps. This will make sure that the meteor moves forwards. Finally, we're going to need to add an if statement. So I'm going to go to control and grab an if statement. We're going to stick this inside the repeat loop under the move 10 steps block. In here, we're going to check if the meteor is touching the rocket ship. And if so, we're going to broadcast our game over message that we made earlier. And now we're done with our meteor. So we're on to our explosion animation. We're going to start by coding a when green flag clicked. When this is clicked, what we're going to want to do is show our time variable. And then we're going to want to switch the backdrop to whichever backdrop we want it to use. In this case, we're going to use backdrop 1, which is just the one with the stars. Finally, we're going to want to hide our sprite because we don't want the explosion to show up until we need it. So you'll see when we click on that, it will hide it, and the time variable will continue to show. Now we need to define what happens when we receive the game over message. So we're going to go to events and choose when I receive game over. So we're going to start by choosing to go to, and we're going to select the rocket ship. This will make sure that it will place itself right on top of the rocket ship every time. Next, we're going to want to show the sprite because we want it to actually show up. And you'll see it will essentially place itself on top, just like that. The next thing we're going to do is go to control and grab a repeat block. We're going to make this repeat as many times as there are costumes for the sprite. In this case, I have 5. So I'm going to make it repeat 5 times. And what we want this to do is wait for a very short amount of time. In this case, I'm going to do 0.03 seconds. You can choose whatever time you like. I just picked a very short time because the shorter the time, the smoother the animation will be. The next thing we're going to do is change the costume. This will make the animation look like it's running. Finally, we need to do whatever we want the code to do when it receives the game over. So we're going to start by grabbing a hide block, and then we're going to hide our time variable because you'll notice that we had it show when we clicked the green flag. Next thing we're going to want to do is switch the backdrop to backdrop 2, which you'll see is our game over backdrop. And then we're going to go down to control and select stop all. This will just make sure that all of our running scripts are stopped. So now let's test it out. You'll see when we run it, the timer starts at 0 and the rocket ship will follow wherever the mouse goes. And you'll also see when it hits a meteor, the explosion will show, and then we'll change to this game over screen. Well, that's the end of this tutorial. If you have any issues with your code, feel free to go back and check it with the code shown in the video. Otherwise, I hope you've had a lot of fun with this project.